This is
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod.
a podcast
RedPubPod.
from Redhawk Publications.
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening out there in podcast land. This is Robert Canipe along with Patty Thompson and Richard Eller, and this is RedPubPod. So cue the theme music. Today we are pleased to have in our midst Dr. Cecil Willis, the author of a book called Hillbilly Odyssey, Resilience in a Small Mountain Mill Town. Dr. Willis is a native of Canton, North Carolina, professor emeritus of sociology and criminology at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. Previous publications were scholarly articles in social science journals, but after retiring from UNC Wilmington, he's moved back to his beloved mountains, lives with his daughter, son-in-law, and 2 grandchildren in Alexander County, North Carolina. Welcome, Dr. Willis.
Thank you. It's Alexander City,
Alexander,
I guess, or
North
community.
Carolina.
Yeah, but it's outside of Weaverville and Asheville.
Well, welcome to the plush welded studios of Redhawk Publications.
You know, it's funny when I heard that you were from Alexander.
It's
Alexander?
a community,
Right.
not an incorporated community, but it's near Weaverville, about 15 minutes from Weaverville.
And not knowing that there was an Alexander City, if you will,
Yeah, there is.
I remember asking you, well, just come on over and pick your books up, because we live near Alexander County.
Yeah.
And I got him a little confused, so I'm thinking, it's
so-
only going to be a 15 or 20-minute drive, and he was so sweet. He's like, yeah, I'll come over, and then I realized, oh, this is not close.
Then we got to figure out now who's responsible for the typo in the about the author that we're going to have to fix. Something just happened to my audio. That's weird. Is it on? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, I want to start off the questioning here with. I'm just very interested in the fact when you and I talked about this earlier, and when you talked to Patty about it, we mentioned this book, another book with Hillbilly in the title, that also has the word elegy in the title, and this is your kind of response to that book.
Yes, it is. I had, when Hillbilly Elegy first came out, it was presented in, the national media, in reviews and so forth as, this is the quintessential statement, authentic portrayal of Appalachian people. And having been from Appalachia myself and growing up there, and after reading it, I realized that, well, this is not an accurate portrayal of my experiences in Appalachia, and it was distorted. He was presented the Appalachian people in very stereotypical ways. I think that is sort of the popular view of people, and of people that are often referred to as hillbillies. And so his personal story to me was very, I guess compelling, you might call it. But he was, he reinforced the story, that Appalachian people are backward, or, slow thinking, lazy, subject to substance abuse, that's their fault. He was blaming them and their culture for all the problems that are found in the Appalachian area. So I was wasn't I guess happy with his portrayal, and I'd already done a lot of even myself background reading and so forth about the problems in Appalachia and so forth, and I just thought he just presented a distorted view, and the thing is, it was in the national media as something that was real, and there is substance abuse in Appalachia, there is poverty, there are
Well, there's substance abuse right down the street from where we sit right now, and poverty. from right here in the area.
Yeah. And, someone said that he engaged in poverty shaming because he criticized the people's lifestyles, how they ate. They had cinnamon rolls for breakfast and Taco Bell for lunch and McDonald's for supper. Like they didn't really know about nutrition. They didn't care about health issues and so forth. And I grew up in Appalachian. I grew up on a farm, and we had you might call organic food before it was cool. We grew we grew our own food. We had garden and vegetables and and
Fresh chicken.
and chicken.
Yeah.
Chickens. Chicken lay an egg, and then when chicken no longer laid an egg, it was a spent chicken, so it was on the Sunday dinner table. And so that was my experience. We, now people are very, self-reliant. We lived in a self-sustained. I lived in kind of almost a self-sustaining household when I was growing up in my early years, and so, this is not, my experience, and so that's the reason I used the title, in this when I was writing this. Is a Hillbilly Odyssey. This is. Odyssey is, of course, a type of journey and so forth, just self-discovery in a lot of ways. And it is. It's my journal. In many ways, it's my story of my own self-discovery, of accepting where I came from and accepting who I am and who my family was and who my, neighbors were and so forth. And so that's the origin of that. And I know some people may look at that and think, well, you're just doing another elegy, and I'm not. I'm doing.
Well, there's a big difference. I did a little Googling a while ago, and the name of your book is Hillbilly Odyssey. And the definition of an odyssey is a long wandering voyage, usually marked by many changes of fortune. Whereas an elegy is a poem of sorrow or lamentation. So the difference between an odyssey and an elegy, there's a hopefulness in an odyssey. And you write about those hopeful things in the book that, just like you've said, we were organic before organic was cool and these kind of things. And there's some stuff to be pushed there. Patty, you mentioned something to me this morning that you wanted to ask Dr. Willis.
Well, as I mentioned just a little prior to the podcast when I met Dr. Willis in the hallway, I was very happy to read this book because for someone from the Northeast, not being as familiar with mountain lifestyle upbringing, it was really educational for me. And to be honest with you, when I thought about most folks living in Appalachia and having worked with some folks from West Virginia, I typically think about coal mining. And I think when you start thinking about Canton, and it's a paper mill, instead of everybody going off to the coal mines, you've got everybody going to a paper mill. It's a little bit different. And it is what do they call it, a company town? Canton, the history of it, and at least the way you portray what paper meant to this town. Everybody more or less lived for that company. The various transitions of the paper company, which we all know as of 2023, I don't think it's anymore. It's no longer there. So I want to just share with our listeners and folks who may want to read this book, it is a different way of life, but you accurately portrayed it, and I could visualize what it must have been like at a simpler time, very self-reliant, self-efficient. You had parents that instilled a lot of good moral values upbringing. You had teachers that cared.
Work ethic.
The importance of taking care of your land and taking care of the new home that your dad created. It's like it really does create a lovely story of a lovely time. And it is important for folks to realize this is a memoir. The difference between an elegy and an odyssey. Initially, when we start talking to folks in podcasts, we ask them about their backgrounds. Well, I can't ask you about your background. Your book is your background. It's a little different, This is your odyssey. This is your journey, and you go on to not only leave a small town where a lot of folks don't, but you've gone on with several degrees behind your belt. and you've returned to the mountains. So your story presents something a little different from what we normally do when we interview a poet or nonfiction. It's interesting to talk to somebody who's writing a memoir.
And that's one of the reasons why I looked up those two different words, is because, one is very, pessimistic, while the word Odyssey is very promising. It's very optimistic. And we've done books, let's see, Richard, we've done furniture mills books, we've done weaving out of Roadhiss. What other factory? We've done the Henry River Mill Village.
Yeah.
We did that.
And we're working right now on doing more furniture workers' stories.
Right.
So, we've covered a lot of what it means to grow up and be part of the industrial community of Western North Carolina.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Willis's book reflects the same values and the same descriptions of what we've had in those other books. So which book is the outlier? Which book is the book that doesn't fit that schedule? It has to be Mr. Vance's book, because it's the only one that disparages your neighbor and stereotype and these kind of things. So,
but he also didn't grow up there, and I think that's important for folks to know. If I'm not mistaken, J.D. Vance, he just spent his summers there, right? I mean, he wasn't brought up there.
No, he was brought up in, I think, Southern Ohio somewhere, and where his grandparents moved to out of Kentucky, and in the Appalachian area, very Appalachian area of Kentucky, and he only visited there in the summer, and occasionally. And his family down there, was primarily what you might call a dysfunctional family. I mean, truly, all families have some dysfunction in them, I would think, but, truly, substance abuse, violence, and it was, he kind of portrayed his family as a quintessential Appalachian family. And, based upon just really, you might say, more superficial or limited experience. So he really didn't grow up, he grew up maybe what you might call an Appalachian community, because there were a lot of Appalachian people migrated up in the, Ohio, Michigan, places like that to find work in the factories there. But he didn't truly grow up there. And it was kind of like when he was writing his own story, he's writing like, look what I've done, and these other people here, these bunch of hillbillies, hadn't done anything. It's kind of like he's presenting himself, elevating himself, I think, above them. And it's really, that kind of story. It's not a story of the people, really. He doesn't look at, the different, complexity of their lives, the different, and the nuances of their lives. He didn't do that, He just oversimplified it, really.
Absolutely. That's a great way to describe it, an oversimplification in the stereotypes. Mm-hmm. If you folks out there in podcast land would like to get a taste of Hillbilly Odyssey, you can go to RedhawkPublications.com. And it is for sale there. We can have it to you in just a couple of days. That's RedhawkPublications.com. So we look forward to sending you a copy. You can also get it on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com as well. But we're able to give Dr. Willis a little bit more royalty money if you buy it from us. So if you don't want to help Jeff Bezos send more rockets into the air, you can just go on over to RedhawkPublications.com. and get it from us. Dr. Willis, your book is also a marvelous history book as well. I mean, not only is your personal memoir and your growing up, your memories from growing up, but I learned a lot about the paper business. I love this chapter called The Smell of Money, Chapter 5. And I wanted to ask you this morning, how are things in Canton today after the Evergreen closure announcement back in 2023?
Yes, as Patty mentioned, about a year ago, in March, Suddenly, Evergreen announced that they were shutting down the mill. They'd been making money. I think a lot of the products were sold to Starbucks for coffee cups, and I think for the juice cartons. And so, they were doing okay, and they just said, we're going to shut it down and consolidate, or make more money, in other words. And so it just left the people high and dry. There were 1,100 people working there, and not just in Canton. A lot of them lived, in the surrounding community.
Waynesville, I think.
Waynesville, too, even some over in Buncombe County, community there. So, and it had an impact, in any industry, you'll know, about furniture industries, it expands beyond simply the people working in the plant and drawing a wage. Well, first of all, they pay taxes in the local community, helps the local government. Then the people spend money, the people that work there spend money in the local, and so it supports businesses as well. And so there it is. Now the town had experienced several challenges in the 21st century. They had two major floods. We had COVID too, and every time a flood came in or every time a challenge like that occurred, they just the community all went together and rebuilt the town. Have people clean out their businesses. People just volunteered. One business, they said the day after the flood, they looked out out their door, and there were a bunch of people standing there with shovels and rakes to help them, clean out the mud and muck and so forth that had gotten into the building. So they pulled together as a town and as a community, and to help their their fellow residents. And so it was and that was in many ways a history of that. It wasn't just recently. It was a history of how people in that community pulled together when times were hard. If a neighbor was sick and they couldn't let's say bring in their tobacco crop or their harvest their hay, then a bunch of them would get together and they'd go over there and they'd help them out. And so that was very much nature of the people there. But the mill started over 100 years ago. It was built in 1908 by a businessman or manufacturer from Ohio, Peter Thompson, who came down and looking for a place to grow and harvest pulpwood for his paper making, and he came upon Canton. And that's you find a lot of industries coming in that they come in to take advantage of the natural resources. In this case, it was spruce trees, and it was the river there, and it was the biggest natural resource, I think, is it's the people there. These are people, hardworking. You grow up on a farm in the mountains, and that's hard work. You have to work all day long, every day, just to make it, to grow enough to survive. And so they were used to working long hours. They were used to working hard. So he took advantage of that too. And that's the nature of a lot of the industries that come in, whether it's West Virginia coal mines or it's furniture factories, textile mills, or paper mills. It's the same thing, And so we had what he wanted, and but he was different than a lot of factory owners that come in and take advantage of the natural resources. He was pretty benevolent, what you might call a benevolent employer. He built a YMCA. He had provided good benefits for the employees. Health insurance, life insurance, all that. He paid a really good wage. They said that in the Depression, a lot of people in the area didn't know there was a Depression because he kept the mill running so they could work and everything. And when World War II came along, he kept the jobs open, available for the employees, one of which was my father. And so it was grew tremendous, had a tremendous impact on the area, both good and bad. I mean, the downside was the environment, with pollution. It's paper mills are very polluting industries.
Is that benign or benevolent leader? Is that like when you mentioned here on page 47 and 48 that Champion International had taken the company over and practiced a more impersonal style of management? Is that what you're talking about? The new cutting of the workforce, and because it said that they cut them down from 3,000 workers to 1,650.
Yes, that's what happened, and it became more part of a larger corporation. Originally, it was owned by Peter Thompson, his company, and his son-in-law, Robertson, was his last name. He was really managed it, and he's the one that instituted a lot of these policies that that was very, very positive policies for the worker. And so, and then when it was sold to Champion International, which is incorporated in a larger company, and so that's when they cut back on the workforce. I think there was one period there, they call it Black Friday, when they got a lot of people, and so they reduced it. I think, I'm trying to remember if I'm correct, maybe it was close to 3,000 peaked. That were employees. I mean, that's a lot, when you think about the supported families and all that stuff. So that was a big change. It was.
You mentioned in the text two of our favorite writers, the late Fred Chappell, who was from Canton, and you also mentioned Ron Rash. You mentioned the novel Serena. Ron Rash has one of his first poetry books is a book of the textile industry called Eureka Mill, where his grandfather worked. And there's a certain poem in there where they talk about the owners ran bolts of cloth no one was ever going to buy because they knew that kids needed shoes and stomachs needed filling. So there was a time in American history where business did see employees as assets, as something to hold on to and something to keep happy, to build those YMCAs, to build those libraries and things like that to help the employees. What do you see business like that being in Canton today? What do you see Canton turning into in 2024?
Yeah. Well, I think they're already trying to make that transition. And that they, with the mill shutting down, there's I guess a positive side to that, and the positive side is the pollution is gone. I mean, the water is still, the river is still getting cleaned up, I guess you might say, but you don't have the smokestacks, you don't have the smell, which locals call the smell of money because they made a good wage. But it was, so now they're trying to focus more upon kind of a tourist kind of, bringing in people that may have come to, the area, the Smoky Mountains or Blue Ridge Mountains and so forth. And people, may want to take advantage of some of the resources there. The Pigeon River, a lot of people, even before the mill came there, a lot of people, local people, they would fish in the river, and trout and stuff like that. And it's still something that could be an industry there, and as well as.
You mentioned in the text that the Evergreen doesn't plan to tear down the mill or do anything; they're just going to leave it. So, do you think that there's some opportunity for redevelopment to turn that into tourist shopping malls or something like that?
I'm sure there is, and I think there, those are ideas that people are entertaining there. But at this point, it's still in control of Evergreen, and until Evergreen decides whether to, sell the mill or give it to the town, which I don't think they would, but they might. or some other company or whatever buy into it to do this thing that you just suggested, and that is, redevelop it, repurpose it into something that.
They're doing that. One of the books we did with Road Hiss, I think they took the old water.
Redeveloping it, yeah.
Yeah.
The shell itself is still there, and there's possibilities of adaptive reuse, we'll call it.
And the way they're looking at it, it could be condos and restaurants and indoor recreation. I mean, you never know.
You never know. I think it would be important to have something like that. Either the mill, the physical structure completely gone, or do we, repurpose it?
It could look unique.
How many mills have they repurposed around here?
Oh, quite a few. I mean, you've got Moretz and Holler and Hickory,
yeah.
and in Lenore, the Bluebell site was changed into living space. So people are coming up with good ways to preserve those buildings and that sort of
But
thing.
as Dr. Willis said, the Evergreen would have to decide what they want to do, because in his text, you write that they're not going to tear it down, but they're not going to sell it.
Right.
So that does mean that it's just got to be fallow there, and
Eventually, they'll make a decision.
those fallow things have a tendency through entropy to
Hopefully before it falls down.
fall down. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You were as a sociologist, how did that affect the way that you wrote?
It did a lot, and I throw a little bit of sociology in here, and
That's what's wonderful about the book. It really is. It's a memoir plus.
It's educational.
Yes, it is, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It is. It did impact how I, viewed my life, and everything, because, of course, after I written this, I'd been in, teaching that area for 40 years and so forth, and was educated in that area. So it was, I think it did inform how I look back on my life and upon the Appalachian world. I think helped me anyway to better understand what went on there.
If you wouldn't mind, towards that end, there is a section of the book that I had mentioned. I think it's kind of pivotal in terms of you choosing to leave the mountains and go elsewhere for your education and eventually leave. But this part that I've kind of pointed out, if you don't mind reading for our readers, I think they'll understand your transition, if you will.
Okay. Yes, this is I think in the chapter, You've Come a Long Way. And that was a quote that some of my friends said to me when they came up here and visited my town. When I drove through the area, and they looked and said, Willis, you've come a long way, and so forth. That's the reason for the title. Anyway, this is a paragraph from that section. When I left Appalachia to pursue my academic career, I understood how my new world viewed the one I grew up in. It was generally a negative view, and one that made me more aware of my heritage, and a bit embarrassed by it. While the world in many ways helped to define who I am, and provided me with many of the values that I carried with me beyond home, I did not really appreciate how much my Appalachian heritage was part of my identity, my sense of self, my soul. I worked to hide my lack of sophistication. It was not just the Appalachian world that I wanted to ignore. It was also my life growing up on a farm and feeling materially deprived. My early years were characterized by lack of indoor plumbing, an outhouse rather than a bathroom, and by living among farm animals, shoveling manure, hoeing corn, and pitching hay. That world defined me as a hayseed, a hick, a rube. I wanted to escape and hide that part of me, to be accepted into my new world. I now recognize the unique and fascinating aspects of Appalachia and its qualities.
I just find that to be so universal. I'm African
That's
American.
good writing too.
Oh, well, it's exceptional writing. But, you're telling a story of any marginalized community or anybody from a strong ethnic background and their feelings like, I'm going to leave home. I'm a small Chinese child brought up in San Francisco. What's it like to be outside? I'm Hispanic. My background is different, and I'm going outside. I'm African American. You're telling another story of a group of people that, again, I never thought of before, and you just put it together so well. And it's a universal story. So, thank you.
That kind of interstitiality, you've got one foot in one culture and one foot in another culture, and yet you don't feel like you belong wholly to either one, that's a common thing for immigration, a common thing for folks that often feel themselves outside of things. And I think it's great how you come to terms with that, and also how you acknowledge that, the kindness in you, the work ethic in you, your ability to be patient and never give up, are those things you learned in Appalachia, working in the mountains, growing up in the mountains, and you bring those with you. And even though they might call us hicks or rubes or these kind of things, we do bring those positive things with us into these new worlds. And these new worlds and these people we deal with benefit from that, because you just might teach somebody a little bit of patience and a little bit of kindness.
That would be great today, wouldn't it?
That's what we try to do every day.
Yeah, good.
And one other thing I'd like to point out, what's unique about your book, Cecil, and I think this will be interesting to our listeners also, especially if they're aspiring to write. Your manuscript was submitted maybe 2 years ago, and initially it got a very kind rejection because we do have our books go through a beta process. And so we had several readers who read it, and they all agreed that they liked the story. It was a diamond in the rough. They wanted to read more, but there was an element of it that wasn't quite ready. And having read their comments and me looking it over, I very kindly said, we like this. We need you to work on this. We need you to work on this a little bit more and resubmit it. And to your credit, my goodness, did you do the work on that? And we thank you.
Yeah, wonderful job.
Yeah.
Wonderful job. A lot of people who get those suggestions and those notes, they go away and we never hear from them again. But this is an instance that I'm glad that you came back, because it's a marvelous book.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's I guess it's part of the heritage too. You don't give up easily. So you keep working at it.
And just so that you know, I sent it back to those readers, and they were like, he got it. Yeah, so it's like, you did the work. You can't deny that.
Were you going to ask him about that process of what he was doing for readers out there or writers out there who might find themselves in the same thing? What was it that caused you not to get dejected? And what did you do? Who'd you take it to?
Well, yeah, in fact, what did you do?
Right. Well, when I got your response, you were encouraging, but you said these are areas that you need to work on, and this is my first book. Writing, not just my, it's my first book, not just a first book of this kind, but if you work in academia, which you all do, and you do, and I had to submit stuff. It's a publish or perish world, and you had to take that feedback and work with it, and you did get reviewers in these journals can be pretty tough, and so you have to be willing to accept the criticism and work from that criticism, and your criticism was very constructive, that you got from the readers, and so I took that and I said, okay, this is encouraging to me, and I have some direction what I need to do to make this better, and I learned along the way more about writing a book than I did before. I was flying blind in many ways. I had this idea of what I wanted to do and the concept of what I wanted to do, which is in a lot of ways reflected in the passage I read. But I just I didn't know. Actually, I didn't know how to do it. And I had given it to a friend of mine to read, and he made some suggestions, and I talked with a couple of other people. There were a couple of people that were writers, and they made some suggestions to me. And so when I got your feedback, I said, well, I think I need some professional help, you might say. And so I contacted actually Gold Leaf Literary Services, and they suggested I contact Tom Rash, and so I did. And I sent him the manuscript, and he gave me some feedback. And he edits a lot of books, fiction and nonfiction. In fact, he edited. I think he's edited Juan Rash, who is his brother's books and everything. And so he gave me some really good suggestions in terms of things like syntax, rephrasing something, that is improved and smoother. He said, focus on the concrete aspects of it. You can write better if you do that. Get down to, in a sense, write also what you know. What you experience, what you feel. And so he read that, gave me feedback. I made those changes, and he sent it back to him, and he made some more feedback. Now he's just he's a tough editor, but he's good. And so I feel if I made him happy, hopefully I'll make you all happy. So,
well, like I say, when I had a chance to reread it and sent it out to the same beta readers, we were like, okay, he nailed it. And it is interesting. Tom Rash is actually helping another of our hopeful authors. I gave him the kind rejection as well, and I said, what, we like this, everyone likes it, but not quite ready. And he sought out Tom Rash, and I believe he's going to be helping him as well. So that's a good relationship there.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great recommendation. It is.
And I believe what we were fortunate to get out of this situation was the perfect synthesis of a memoir that educates. But it's part of the memoir, instead of it being, consciously, now I'm going to stop here and I'm going to teach you something. The education is built into the story of this man who grew up as a boy in these towns, on these farms, in this place. But at the same time, there's so much good cause and effect sociology, there's so much good history, that's what I think you buy a copy of the book, you get all three of those things in this book. Instead of just somebody talking about their lives and their relatives and this, that, and the other thing, you also get all this extra stuff. So it's kind of a genre in and of itself, I believe, in that synthesis. And as an academic, I love that.
And I sensed that at a certain point you went through the imposter phase of your life. You knew where you came from. You had those insecurities, but your degrees were continually uplifting you. And then eventually you end up at UNC Wilmington for the majority of your academic career teaching. And guess what? Now you're back in the mountains. So that's the next question, Dr. Willis. Can you go home again? And that's mentioned towards the end, of course. So I am giving that back to you. But at the same time, it's like, what is it now that's different? That you're back, you're older, you've got a different lens that you look through.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you can't go home again. Of course, people familiar with Mountain Riders should know Thomas Wolfe. That was what he wrote. But yeah, it's in that sense, you can't. He's right. You can't go home again. In a sense that you can't go home again and expect everything to be exactly like it was when you grew up here. Things have changed. You changed. I mean, I changed. I was not the same person in many ways when I came back here. I'd been, over 40 years in a different kind of environment, and then I came back in a sense, you may expect, well, it's going to be kind of like it was, and it was and it wasn't. I mean, there were a lot of things the same. I think a lot of the values are still here. I think, a lot of, the cultural aspects of it, the positive aspects are still here. The landscape is still beautiful, fewer farms, more vacation homes, but still it's there. The people are basically the same, but, my hometown changed, the mill had downsized by the time I came back, and everything, and so it just you can't go. When it says you can't go home again, you can't go home again and expect everything to be like it was when you left, and that's true of any of us, whether you're from the Northeast or or out west or whatever, or Midwest. It's things are going to change, but the core, I think, is still there. I think the core of the people in the community.
The soul is still there. When I go to Jersey, I do get out of Jersey just as quick. But you know what? The soul is still there.
The soul
Can't
of
take
Jersey
the
is
Jersey
still
out of me. Sorry.
Well, see, that's hence the title of his epilogue. I am one of you forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's no matter what changes on the exterior, the interior remains the same as that 12-year-old boy that was shoveling manure on the farm.
Yeah.
So,
It went from shoveling manure on the farm to shoveling manure, I guess,
in the classroom.
Yeah, I just want to thank you so much for coming out. This has been an absolute treasure and joy, and appreciate your coming down from Alexander.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed being here, and thank you for inviting me.
And remember, if you want to read this book, go to redhawkpublications.com and you can order your own copy. And I'm going to have Dr. Willis sign a few of our stock copies before he leaves. So you just may get an autographed copy if you act now. So go to the website, redhawkpublications.com. Look around on there. You'll find Hillbilly Odyssey. You can search for it, or it's on our new releases, or it's on our memoir page. Again, thank you for coming to see us. Is there anything else you want to cover?
No, just to let folks know that when you see RedPubPod pop up, make sure you like, share, follow, and subscribe. That's all we ask you to do.
Yeah, all of that
Just a few
stuff.
things.
Yeah. And remember, not everybody was kung fu fighting. I don't care what the song says. So until next time, RedPubPod.
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 Yay!
Y'all take care, and please
Thank you.
come hear us again.
This has been
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod.
a podcast
RedPubPod.
from Redhawk Publications.
RedPubPod.
RedPubPod.
RedPub